Dr. Dunnick, thank you for taking this time to meet with me. The purpose of this interview is to discuss your life and legacy here at the University of Michigan and the way you view how things have gone over the last 25 years. Thank you for your time.
It's a pleasure to be here.
The University of Michigan Health System, now known as Michigan Medicine, means many things to many people. It's routinely ranked in the top 10 in a variety of medical subspecialties and training programs, and patients come here from hundreds or thousands of miles away to seek care in these walls. And after spending 25 years or more here as the chairman, I'm curious, what does this place mean to you?
I was raised about 150 miles from here in northern Indiana. I went to college at Purdue, and the best of our graduates seemed to want to go to the University of Michigan. It was common for them to come here to get graduate degrees and particularly get MBAs. And so it always had a very positive reputation for me. So when I began to think about becoming a department chair, the University of Michigan was very high on my list as a place I'd like to go. It has a reputation of excellence, but also of integrity, and it's been a leader in diversity. It's the university that took it to the Supreme Court and lost, but at least tried.
You've overseen the installation of PACS workstations, the elimination of hard copy film and alternators, the introduction of electronic dictation systems, the obsolescence of transcriptionists, innovations in all forms of medical imaging, SPECT, CT, PET, MR, ultrasound, and the explosion of medical imaging both in volume and effectiveness. Of the many changes you've observed over your career in our specialty, which of them strike you as having the most impact?
Well, really, it's the computer, because that's what's made all of this possible. Cormac received the Nobel Prize for demonstrating that a CT scanner could be built. He did it mathematically, but never produced any images. It was Hounsfield, of course, that produced the first images, and it took literally days to reconstruct those images because of the power of the computer at the time. Now, of course, we can do sub-second scanning. And it's the computer that's really driven it all. I think we've been able to do things much faster than we have in the past. We've become more efficient as a result of it. But on the other hand, we've lost a little bit of the human element as well.
Do you have a mantra or a slogan that you live by?
Well, that's a very complicated question because life is complicated. But Gerald Ford said something like, work hard, be honest, and come home for dinner on time. And I think that last phrase reminds us about the personal side of our lives. We so often talk about a balance between professional and personal lives. And coming home on time means respecting that personal side.
Is there a living or historical figure who has had a significant influence on your mannerisms and priorities?
Well, we're all a function of our biographies, of whom we've interacted with all our lives. And I've had a series of mentors, and I've learned from each one of them. Of course, we didn't call them mentors in those days. They were just more senior people who gave me help and advice. Historically, as a lifelong baseball fan, I've also learned lessons in leadership from them. And one of them is Joe McCarthy, who was a manager of the Chicago Cubs. And the story here is that Hack Wilson was an outstanding baseball player, became a Hall of Famer, started out with the New York Giants, and John McGraw, another legendary manager, played what we call small ball. That is before Ruth really introduced the home run. And Hack Wilson was not a great small ball player, but he was very talented. McGraw kept him tied into his system, which didn't fit Wilson very well. Wilson also had a problem with alcohol, and McGraw was a teetotaler. So you can imagine the two didn't fit too well. So he traded him to the Cubs, where Joe McCarthy was a manager, and Joe recognized both Wilson's talent, but also had the ability to manage him. So we worked with him on his drinking problem, kept that under control, and Hack Wilson went on to set the National League record for most home runs in a season and still owns the record for most RBIs in a season. Well, Joe was fired by the Wrigleys because although he won the pennant in 1929, he didn't win the World Series. So at the end of the 30 season, he was fired, he went to the Yankees, and became a legendary manager for the New York Yankees. When he left, Hack Wilson deteriorated and was out of baseball in just a couple of years. So it's managing people. That's really what leadership is all about. Understanding them, trying to work with them to get the best out of them and minimize their deficiencies.
Many radiologists recognize that you had a role to play in converting the old oral boards format into the now multiple choice format. And that change understandably created a lot of reactions from people, both positive and negative. In retrospect, was that the right decision? And if so, why?
Humans resist change. It's normal. But you have to work through that. And there was a problem with the oral board exams that we didn't really want to go too public with, and that was the inconsistency of the exam. We had examiners that I called zealots that liked everybody, didn't fail anyone. And we had people at the other end of the spectrum. And so the exam that someone got varied with who they got as an examiner. In GU, we had people who did MR, people who didn't, people who did ultrasound, people who didn't. And so the exam given by those examiners varied by the examiner you drew. So you had a variation in the exam, you had a variation in the scores, and then you would occasionally even have glitches, shall we say. We had an examiner who answered a cell phone during an exam. Just things that just absolutely cannot be done. So we really needed to move off that format. We needed to do something that was more objective, more consistent, and of course a computer-based exam is a good way to go to do that.
Mm-hmm. So what is your biggest regret?
I try not to think about the many mistakes and things that I wish I could have done over because that's past. I think of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. The moving finger writes, and having writ moves on. Nor all your piety nor wit can lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all your tears wash out a word of it. So I try to think forward rather than backward.
Understood. In future generations, trainees and faculty who are not yet here are going to walk into our radiology library and see all the paintings hanging on the wall, and one of them will be yours. And they'll wonder who you were and what you stood for. What would you want them to know about you and the department in which they now work?
Well, I think of these positions like a relay race. It was my turn to carry the baton, and I need to run as hard as I can before I pass the baton on to the next person. I'd like people to think of me as someone who gave their full measure, running as hard as they could before passing it on.
As you move into a new phase of your life, the department is nervously awaiting who might be your successor. Your tenure at the University of Michigan has been incredibly successful and stable, of course. Change always brings trepidation. If you were in charge of the selection committee choosing the new chair, what characteristics would you prioritize?
Well, I would say there are two things. Whoever the new chair might be, I would hope that they would be a good listener. The people doing the work know more about what they're doing than the chair can. And so they really need to be constantly gathering information, learning about the department and what people do. So They shouldn't think that they know more than others or know all the answers. They should be working with the faculty to try to have a departmental response to gather as much information as possible. The other answer I might give you is I've spent some time thinking about chairs who fail. And I think there are several categories of those. But one category that I would try to watch out for are people who want it for personal advancement rather than people who are trying to improve the department, the institution, to advance the field, to make radiology better and to make that department better. I often say, it's not about me, it's about the department. And it's what the department can do to contribute to the medical center and ultimately improve patient care, because that's why we're all here.
We have definitely seen examples recently and in the past of chairs who go with the best intentions to places, but for a variety of reasons, it doesn't work out. And oftentimes that leads to bad blood, hurt feelings, turmoil. If you could offer advice to the incoming chair to help prevent that from happening here, what would it be?
First, to come in and learn as much as you can about the institution. Try to understand the culture of the institution. Talk to all the people, understand why they're here, what their goals are, what they're trying to accomplish. Because I think one important part of the chair's job is to mentor, to help, so that all of the faculty can try to achieve their goals as well. The trick, of course, is to make sure that their goals are consistent with what the department needs to have done.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to ask you about the future. In 1997, Deep Blue destroyed chess grandmaster Garry Kasparov. And in 2004, Ken Jennings won 74 consecutive episodes of Jeopardy! Won $2.5 million, outsmarting the smartest people who'd ever been on Jeopardy! Before being demolished by a computer, Watson. And in Final Jeopardy! He famously wrote on his answer, "I, for one, welcome our new computer overlords." In 2016, AlphaGo, which is a Google product, bested master Lee Sedol 4-1 in the game Go. And after the match, Lee stated, "It made me question human creativity. When I saw AlphaGo's moves, I wondered whether the Go moves I have known were the right ones." In 2017, you can open your phone and type the word tree into the picture folder, and it will automatically find for you every photo you've ever taken that contains a tree. Facebook can recognize billions of faces regardless of what position or orientation they're in or the lighting. And Elon Musk, creator of Tesla and SpaceX, has described artificial intelligence as an existential threat. So I wonder, in the context of radiology and rapidly accelerating artificial intelligence technology outpacing human performance in complex tasks, how should radiologists and radiology departments position themselves to thrive in this new age, which seems inevitable?
We can't stop progress, so we should welcome it. Artificial intelligence, we have many different terms for it. I think of it as machine learning, is something that I think we can harness, that we can use, we can make our lives better. If you think of all the technology advances, they're coming. The real question is, how do we use it? Can we use this to help us with the more mundane parts of our job so that we can be a better interface with that imaging information and care of the patient? I think there's still an enormous role for the human. The question, how can our computers, how can machine learning, artificial intelligence, if you will, help us to do a better job?
It can be scary. You know, if you're looking down the future and you see computers coming for our jobs, what would you say to medical students who are considering radiology as a field but are nervous that a computer could completely replace their function?
Well, I would prefer to use the word exciting rather than scary. I think the potential here is incredible. What I would like to see is including the patient clinical information into the exam protocol. Very difficult for humans to do all of that. But if we can get the computer to help us with that, couldn't we do a better job? Then when it comes to the interpretation, that clinical information, as well as all the other knowledge that we've accumulated over the years, comes up with a pretest probability. We add the pretest probability to the imaging findings, I think we'll be much more accurate in our final interpretations.
Sounds like you're optimistic.
Very.